Guardians, Into the Light is here, and with it comes a brand new game mode, Onslaught, where you will fight wave after wave of enemies, truly testing your capabilities as a Guardian. Today, we will cover the top 4 Titan builds that will make Onslaught feel like a nice stroll on the beach.
Oh, that's nice.
Onslaught throws a metric butt ton of enemies at you. With these builds, we'll focus on clearing out as many as possible as quick as possible, while at the same time, we focus on keeping us and our team alive. These builds are tailored to excel in environments with a ton of enemies, while melting any bosses that stand in your way of these old weapons. Wait, is that right? Old weapons? Sorry, new weapons. So rally your fellow Guardians, prepare your arsenal, and join us as we explore the top 4 Titan builds designed to dominate PvE content in Destiny 2. Remember to leave a like if you find this video helpful, and if you like seeing build videos and other Destiny 2 helpful content, consider hitting that subscribe button. With that being said, let's jump right on into it. There's nothing quite as satisfying as flying in the air and then slamming back down, exploding a group of enemies that just spawned. This build has quickly become one of my recent favorites, and that is the Infinite Ignitions build. Onslaught requires you to kill waves of enemies as quickly as possible, and this build does not disappoint. That's mainly because of Consecration, which allows you to send 2 waves of solar energy. The first scorches targets, and the second ignites any scorched targets. Since Onslaught has set spawns, you can basically spawn trap enemies. And with this build, we have super high ability regeneration rate for our melee, and that comes from 3 main things. First up, our exotic, Heart of Inmost Light, or Hoil. With this exotic, use one of your abilities to empower the other 2, giving them 5 seconds of increased damage, but more importantly, increased regeneration rate. By using our grenade and our barricade, we can have an increased 800% regeneration rate. And the second reason is the fragment Ember of Benevolence, so that when you apply Cure, Radiant, Restoration, or you revive an ally, you gain 400% regeneration rate for all of your abilities. And this will be super easy to proc, but we'll touch on that later. The final reason is from Ember of Searing, so that killing scorched enemies gives you back 8 to 25% ability energy per kill. So when you spawn kill that group of 3 Thrall and 1 Ogre, you immediately get back 49% of your melee. This becomes super potent when dealing massive damage to waves of enemies in Onslaught. Any downtime you have, you can easily proc Hoil and Ember of Benevolence for an additional 4,500% regeneration rate. So what is the flow for this build? Well, the flow goes like this. You pop your healing grenade on you and your teammate to give restoration, and that procs Ember of Benevolence and Hoil. Use your Consecration Slam to wipe out enemies, extending that restoration, while at the same time proccing Radiant, which in turn procs Hoil and Ember of Benevolence. Sounds a little bit complicated, but think of it this way. You stay near your teammates, you use your grenade to heal everyone, you use your melee to wipe out any enemies, and there you have it. Pretty simple. So how can we improve this build? Well, I like to shoot for 100 resilience, about 90 to 100 strength, and roughly 50 to 60 for both discipline and intellect. Supers can be pretty useful in Onslaught, so don't forget to use them often. Solar weapons excel with a build like this, because they allow us to extend our restoration and radiant, as well as deal extra damage when we pair it with our weapon surge mods. And that paired with harmonic siphon and heavy-handed, we generate orbs with our melees and our weapons. Make sure to bring a weapon that can stun overload champions. Your melee can stun unstoppable champions, and when you have radiant, any other weapons can stun barrier champions. So you can easily take out any champions that stand in your way. Ignitions make easy work of waves of enemies in Onslaught. Restoration helps to keep you and your team alive. And with Burning Maul, you can melt any bosses that try to get in your way. All right, let's take a look at our second build, and that's gonna be a Hoarfrost-Z Stasis Titan build. In the past, I have recommended an Icefall Mantle Stasis Titan build, and while I do think that build is good, this build is a little bit stronger for ad clearing, which is super important for Onslaught. We aim to create as many crystals as possible, which is why we're taking advantage of Whisper of Shards for an increased 500% grenade recharge rate, so that we can create more crystals more often with our Glacial Grenade. We add in the aspect Howl of the Storm, which means we can generate even more crystals. This means that our grenade, melee, and class ability will all spawn a wall of crystals that deal massive burst damage, but also help you recharge your grenade energy. Since we can create so many crystals, we add in the aspect Tectonic Harvest and the fragments Whisper of Rime and Fissures, so that our crystals will drop shards that will give you more health and overshield. And our crystals will now deal more damage in a larger area. This gives us the capability to wipe out waves of enemies on demand by using any of our abilities, and get back a bit of health in the process. So we amp up the survivability a little bit further. with Whisper of Chains, so that when we're near frozen targets or a crystal, we get 40% damage resistance. So what's the flow for this build? Well, create as many crystals as possible. This season, we have 2 artifact perks that increase the damage from crystals and spawn more crystals when killing a frozen enemy. So use your grenade, use your melee, and use your class ability to spawn as many crystals as possible. Pick up any leftover shards after shattering them to gain health and melee energy back. And how do you improve this build? Well, for stats, I shoot for 100 in resilience and discipline. Then I want about 60 in both intellect and strength. You'll notice that for most of these Onslaught builds, we want super energy more than typical. That's because all of these supers are roaming supers. Feel free to pop it whenever you have bosses or just a big wave of enemies coming. I found that Sunshot with a rocket and a sniper or fusion is the best option. Sunshot by itself is already a super strong weapon and can help out with clearing out any leftover adds if you don't have any of your abilities. Weapons like Burglass Curve or Salvation's Grip are both also a ton of fun, since they let you generate even more crystals. Remember, this build revolves purely around how many crystals you can generate. Not only does it deal massive damage, but it also keeps you alive, dropping you health, overshield, and when you're near them, damage resistance. With the added shatter damage from our fragments and seasonal artifact perks, crystals will decimate anything nearby. So we generate as many as we can to break through the waves of enemies. And next on our list is a Strand Synthoceps build. This is a slightly altered version of the Strand Worm God build that we've shown on the channel before. So if you want a full breakdown, check out this video here. Strand is a very potent build when it comes to clearing out a ton of enemies very quickly, especially on Titan. And that's because of 2 main things. First, we get nearly infinite melees that are incredibly strong and deal AoE damage. We take Synthoceps, which is a pair of exotic gauntlets, for one of its main benefits, increased melee damage. When we become surrounded, we gain an increased 165% melee damage, which stacks perfectly with our aspect, Banner of War, giving us an additional 40% melee damage when active. With these 2 alone, we deal an additional 271% damage for all of our melees. And this is why we take advantage of grapple, because if you melee after grappling, it does a ton of AoE damage. Pair that with the 3 frenzy blades, and you'll be slicing through any and all enemies. Well, except exploders. We also have access to one of the best ad clearing supers in the game, Blade Fury. Your light attacks deal a ton of damage in a wide area, or you can use your heavy attack to send out waves that will deal damage from a distance and suspend targets. This super is an easy way to deal with those pesky unstoppable ogres. With Synthoceps, we gain an additional 50% damage to our supers when surrounded, so we can use our Blade Fury on champs or bosses, but not on tormentors. They don't like supers. You might be asking, well, what's the second reason it's so good? It's survivability, plain and simple. We use the fragment Thread of Warding and the aspect Into the Fray to have unlimited access to 45% damage resistance. Oh yeah, and that aspect I mentioned earlier, Banner of War, yeah, that also heals you and your team. This healing is a little bit slow at first, but at max stacks, when you have Woven Mail, you're nearly invincible. So what's the flow for this build? Well, when it comes to Synthoceps, there's no real quote-unquote flow. Just get in there and get at least 1 melee kill to proc Banner. That's it. You can be more efficient by grappling to tangles or grapple points from the navigator, or you can throw tangles at a group of enemies close by, which will give back more melee energy from Thread of Fury. And it'll also proc Woven Mail, which gives quicker melee regeneration rate from Into the Fray. This also gives your nearby teammates Woven Mail, keeping them healthier as well. So how do you improve the build? Well, for stats, I shoot for 100 resilience and discipline. Then I go for a balance of strength and intellect. Both are super strong and super useful, but having your grapple as much as possible is super helpful, especially if you don't have the navigator. Speaking of, there are a few weapons that really help this build become even stronger. Tractor Cannon is an easy weapon to use, and it'll give you and your teammate extra damage from weaken. You could also take a 1-2 punch shotgun to amp up your melee damage to the next level, but my absolute favorite is the navigator, since it can put down a grapple point and you can basically have infinite grapple melees while defending a set area. You can even get lucky sometimes and it'll make a semi-permanent grapple point that will persist through at least a few waves, but don't count on that one. I also like Indebted Kindness as a heavy hitting sidearm that will take care of barrier champs. This build is a top-notch build for Onslaught. It excels at locking down areas with your near infinite melees, while dealing high damage to bosses with your super. Plus, you'll be keeping you and your team alive with the extra Woven Mail and healing from Banner of War. And for the 4th build on our list, shockingly, I'm putting a Void build on this list. Void has felt a bit weak lately, but man, does this build excel in Onslaught. With Doomfang Pauldron, we can basically have infinite uptime on our super. When you have Sentinel Shield, we not only are getting good ad clearing potential, but we also get super energy back from our shield throw based on how many enemies it hits. And since there's so many enemies spawning in Onslaught, this means once you're in your super, it can nearly last the full wave of enemies. And the crazy thing is, if we get a powered melee kill, we get 20% energy towards our super. That plus massive orb creation means you'll have your super nearly all the time. That is super strong, but Doomfang also gives us 25% damage to our void weapons by either stacking up kills with void weapons or getting a powered melee kill. So we bring a void weapon with us to take advantage of Echo of Instability, Undermining, and Remnants, to have our grenades weaken targets, last longer, and give volatile rounds to our weapons. We then add in Devour from picking up orbs to gain health, but also to gain grenade energy back on kills to repeat the process. Meanwhile, we have the incredible wombo combo of Bastion to gain overshield from barricades and Offensive Bulwark to gain increased grenade recharge rate while we have an overshield, so that we gain more survivability and more damage potential. That's the core of the build. We use mods to gain more orbs and orbs to gain more ability energy, making this build super fun and super easy to use. So how do we improve it? Well, for stats, I shoot for 100 resilience and 100 discipline. We then go for about 50 in recovery and strength. Intellect isn't really necessary for this one since we do get 20% on melee kills, so I like to take that extra recovery instead. Graviton Lance is amazing. It already does a ton of damage, but with the ability to create basically infinite explosions, it makes it perfect for Onslaught. Mana Core is also a fantastic option with its new rework. Shooting enemies while your anti-grav is active gives you overshield for more health and grenade recharge rate. Plus, it increases its own damage and makes it harder for enemies to hit you. With your volatile rounds, it honestly feels like you're flying in an AC-130 mowing down all the enemies. Since we have increased void weapon damage, we want to take a void heavy. Regnant or the new Edge Transit is good for burst DPS and wiping out all the mini bosses and champions. A void machine gun is fantastic for ad clearing and dealing pretty decent damage, especially when paired with volatile rounds. I also like to take a sniper in the primary slot so that we can take care of those pesky tormentors. From our super to our volatile rounds and weapon surge, we can easily wipe out a ton of targets. Our Barricade and Devour offers us a way to heal and get back even more grenade energy. What's there not to love? And there you have it, Guardians. I put links in the description to these builds in case you want to see an even more in-depth breakdown of how they work. Remember, mastering these builds is only the beginning. Experiment with different combinations, tweak your loadouts to suit your playstyle, and never stop honing your skills. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more Destiny 2 content. And share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. What do you think of the new Onslaught mode? Keep an eye out for future videos as we continue to explore the ever-evolving world of Destiny 2. Till then, may the threads of fate be ever in your favor. This is Lucky Mech, signing off. See you on the next adventure, Guardians.